Baylor Director of Athletics, Mack Rhoades, is normally with us on Tuesday, but this week is condensed, it's packed, it's crazy. Big 12 meetings Thursday and Friday, which we'll get into those next week after they're done. He joins us on 365 Sports, and thank you. We appreciate your time. We know there's a lot going on. What was, and you probably saw your schedule and knew it a little bit in advance, but what jumped out at you? Was it the 8 home games or something else?
Obviously knew of the 8 home games, just given our non-conference and, all 3 of those being at home, and knowing that this was going to be the year that we were going to play, 5 Big 12 games at home and 4 on the road. So, I thought it was a good balance. Probably what stood out most is just 5 of 6, your first 5 of 6 at home. Certainly wasn't maybe expecting that. When you think, obviously knew Texas State, Utah, Long Island, but just how the next 3 would play out, the Texas and Texas Tech at home, and then UCF sandwich in between. So that's probably what surprised me most. I really like the schedule. I like where the bye week falls. I think there's a good mix and balance in terms of, home and away. We had long conversations, within the conference just about the sequencing and playing back-to-back road trips. We've talked about it on this show with the addition of BYU and Cincy and UCF. Those are long trips like, West Virginia. And so making sure you weren't doing that, going those places back to back. And so, the home game in between those 2 at UCF and at Cincinnati, I think is good. So not a whole lot to complain about. I think it's an aggressive schedule. It's a really tough schedule. But we'll look forward to playing it, and continuing to play the schools in Texas, Texas Tech and now adding Houston and TCU. I think that's going to continue to be important for our fans and for our program as well.
What's it like for someone, you've been in this business for a long time, and scheduling is a big part of what you do every year, and the stress of it and all of that, to have to look at a schedule, and this is this 1 year schedule, and not have to think about it like, well, then next year we're going to have to go to this place and that place because next year you guys are going to have to pretty much do all this again.
Yeah. Next year, you're right, Paul. It's, it won't be, common opponents. So those that we're playing, necessarily at home, we're going to play those exact opponents, on the road. And so it'll be a new schedule that a computer, helps to spit out. And, again, it takes into account, just competitiveness, of the programs over the last 5 years. It certainly takes into account, geography and some of our principles and in terms of, just home and away. And so, we'll start that over. Now, I do think that there's an opportunity once we get down to, to the number of teams, right, being solid in terms of the number of teams within the conference. I do think there's an opportunity to be able to put out a schedule, at least 2 years at a time, and maybe even longer than that. And I think also when we think about future Big 12 schedule, I believe, and this is my opinion, at least at this point in time, we're going to have some really thoughtful conversation how we schedule conference-wise. And I'm not saying we should change it, but I do think we need to have the conversation when we think about a 12-team playoff. And what helps the Big 12 get as many teams into the 12-team playoff as possible. And, that's going to be really important if, it comes down to some type of, revenue share model where there's a premium for the teams, that make it to the playoff and hence the conferences that those teams reside in. So, I think a lot for us to be thinking about as we move forward.
Mack, as we've talked about, you can't play everybody, but I'm sure most teams out there would love to have played Oklahoma and Texas. You do get Texas, so that's great. You don't get Oklahoma, but you also don't play Oklahoma State, which is just that's different. You've been playing the Oklahoma schools for well over a decade. Any level of disappointment or anything along those lines and not seeing them, or just was it kind of weird to not see them on the schedule now?
Yeah, I think that's a really good description. I think it was kind of weird. It felt like Oklahoma State, Baylor in football, that was starting to heat up as a pretty good rivalry, and we've got great respect for Oklahoma State. Obviously, played them not this most recent year, but the year before in the champ game, and Coach Gundy does a great job, and so that's a little bit different and a little bit bittersweet. Again, I think we have a great schedule, but we'll miss playing them just from a competitive standpoint and what that game meant, each and every year. And then, Oklahoma, sure. I mean, there's some sadness and, don't know, it's the question everybody continues to ask, will we remain, 14 for the last 2 years of this TV contract, or, is it going to be 14 and then drop down to 12? And so there's this possibility that we may never, play, Oklahoma again as a conference opponent. And that's a little bit bittersweet because I think that has turned into a pretty darn good rivalry as well. So, Craig, you're right on. But it's, moving forward and, certainly I think the opportunities to play, the 3 of the 4, teams, new members of the team. I think that's really great opportunity for us, and look forward to hosting Houston, and look forward to the 2 road trips in Orlando and Cincinnati.
Mack, the schedule obviously has been mentioned. Not everybody can play everybody. There's no division. So what are the contingencies? Are there like 15 different tiebreakers on how in the end? Because you weren't around, but you remember what happened in 14 with TCU and Baylor. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I've heard about that a couple times. What was it? One true champion?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard that. So yes, there are scenarios for tiebreakers, and you might be right when you say 15, but it's the way of the world, and that's where everybody's headed. And I think you've already seen some of the Power Fives that were divisional, right, getting out of divisions with the recent change in NCAA legislation. It required divisions to play a championship game, and the Big 12 obviously went to the NCAA and got a waiver because we were less than 12 teams, and so we were able just with 10 to play the championship game. But I think everybody is going to head in the direction where it's no divisions. I still think it's really hard to be able to say, hey, your 2 best teams are going to play most definitely in the conference championship when not everybody's going to get to play everyone. And so that was hard. That was the beauty and the uniqueness of having 10 and, with 9 non-conference games, because you played every opponent. So to address your question, I think it's where we're all headed, and we're gonna have to navigate it as best we can in a most fair and competitive way.
Does the 12-team playoffs have the burn for that? Like you talked about a little bit of maybe your best 2 teams don't play because of, the schedule's different. Somebody, might have a loss. You might have 2 teams that are undefeated and one of the teams undefeated, not necessarily your best team, but because of that 12-team playoff, you think that maybe that second best team can get in?
Yeah, no, I do. Paul, I think that, the 12-team playoff, that expansion helps. And, I'm excited, personally about 12 teams, because you think, last, 2 out of 3 years, 19 and 21. I mean, Baylor would have been in it twice, and so I'm excited about it. And I think for the Big 12, I really think about it. It's not how do we get 2 in, but how do we get 3, and maybe even a 4th when we think about, expanding to 12. And so, again, it's going to be – I'm not sure that we change anything we're doing, but I do think we need to kind of pause and have some conversations. Say, all right, moving forward, do we really have the best model when we think about, greatest opportunity to get teams into the 12?
At one point in time, you had Louisiana Tech scheduled, but that got scrapped over a year ago, and you had a non-conference game to make up. You guys ended up playing Albany last year, but Long Island this year fills out the schedule. I'd asked you about, what was the remaining game that hadn't been announced, and it turns out it's the Long Island Sharks. So how did that come to be?
Yeah, I mean, we needed to fill the hole, right, with La Tech going off the schedule, and just quite frankly, there weren't a whole lot of choices at the time. It's the first time like Utah that we'll ever play Long Island, and we really wanted an FCS matchup, and that's not to be disrespectful to Long Island, but they have less scholarships, probably not as physical. And, trying to sandwich it, not knowing, what was September 23rd was going to look like, but trying to sandwich it, in between and help our guys continue to grow. I think going into this upcoming season, we're still going to be a really young team. And so, that was certainly part of it when we were thinking about the maturity of our team and where it is, competitively. And just feels like it's a good game coming off, what's going to be, I think a heck of a football game against Utah. Coach Whittingham has done an unbelievable job there, and they've been, if not at the top, near the top in the Pac-12, over the last 2 to 3 years.
Mack, last thing, and I know tomorrow's Big 12 meetings and all that goes on with it. Did you and others notice that when everybody kind of had their own graphic of releasing the schedule, like an invitation, that a couple of schools just retweeted the Big 12 and the other 12 kind of like it was like a celebration?
Yes, I did notice that. So I did, and I think we've got a group of 12 that's really close and really supportive and really excited, and I think there's, again, really good camaraderie in the room, in the president chancellor room, in the AD room, and I think this conference, Big 12, is going to be a conference to be reckoned with in the future. And we've got really, really good people. We've got really good sport programs across the board. Football has been extremely competitive from top to bottom. The bottom end of the league has certainly improved dramatically, and I think next year with the 4 new, this is going to be as competitive a football conference as anybody in the country.
Mack, is there a chance this is the last year that Texas and Oklahoma end up on the schedule?
Yeah, I do think there's a chance, and certainly don't want to be disingenuous and say no, absolutely there's not a chance. There is a chance, and I think that still remains to be played out, and hopefully we have direction for everybody involved, right? For the 12 of us, for Oklahoma and Texas, that we have some clarity, here in the near future, and we know, what it's going to look like, and I just think that's best. That's healthy for everyone.
Thank you, sir, for your time. We appreciate it. I know you got a crazy schedule. Enjoy the Big 12 meetings up in Dallas and Fort Worth this week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mack Rhoades, Director of Athletics, and we got about